Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I am a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. My guest today is Johannes Richter, a student at Clarkson University who's conducting a survey in St. Lawrence County designed to improve how local food assistance resources are utilized and make sure that the people who need them can get to them. Johannes, welcome to North Country Matters. I am so glad to be able to talk to you about the work you are doing to improve our county residents' access to food assistance. It is such a timely and important topic in the face of the mounting food costs we all are facing and changes to the federal food aid through programs like SNAP.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Donna. I really appreciate it. I've been very excited to get to talk to you and share this important work. And yeah, I absolutely agree. This is quite the time we're in now, especially for college students. This has been a persistent barrier for our students, especially as they're balancing class schedules and jobs. And, we're doing what we can to support them.
I
So
literally have
thank you.
read two new reports just this week. One about the barriers to food assistance for college students and what happens and how that creates problems for them to graduate. The other one that I read this morning was about the lack of housing support. So again, for college students, particularly students who may be caregiving or parenting or not traditional students, there's a lot of barriers in the way. So we always ask a new guest to tell us something about themselves and how they came to be doing the work they're doing. So what's your story, Johannes?
Yeah, so this started a few years ago now, during my freshman year of high school. So it was the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, which feels like a fever dream for us now. But when a friend of mine, a friend and myself co-founded the P2 Food Market to help our students, because at that time no one was in the schools, but we still had a lot of our students who needed food assistance. For a lot of them, that meal they got at during the day at school, that was the most nutritious meal they got, if the only meal they got during the day. So we had a lot of student need there, and that kind of propelled me into this journey of addressing food insecurity. And after, going through high school and seeing the impact that it had not just on our students, but on the greater community in Potsdam, because we did expand and started offering food to our students or to the community, it really opened my eyes to a whole other world that is really important. We need to address it, especially now more than ever. So since then, though, stepping into my role at Clarkson, not just as a student, but as a student manager of the CU Pantry, it's been such a great opportunity for me to work with, our administration at the university, as well as the Food Bank of Central New York. I'm really fortunate to have built such good relationships with the food bank. I've interned with them last summer, and I'm excited to go back again this coming summer. So yeah, it's been a really wild ride so far. I wouldn't change a thing. It's been so meaningful to me, and I'm just thankful to be in the position to help people the way that I have.
Well, with your high school experience and your community experience, you certainly segued into the role as the student manager at the Clarkson Food Pantry with a lot of previous experience, didn't you? Which I bet a lot of young people who are just going to college don't have that depth of experience that you had.
Yeah, I was definitely very fortunate to gain the experience that I did throughout high school. I was in a service club and, always helping out, and that really led me to where I am today. I didn't quite see food banking and, addressing food insecurity as a career for myself until I came to Clarkson and stepped into the student manager role for the CU Pantry. And, since being there, it's really opened my eyes, like I said, to all the possibilities out there, as well as all the underlying issues that might get overlooked. For college hunger, a lot of people might not think it's that big of an issue because when we think of college hunger, a lot of us think of students being on meal plans and living on campus. So, at the surface level, we're like, oh, that shouldn't be that big of an issue. But there's so much more to that. You mentioned non-traditional students. At Clarkson, we have a large population of our graduate students. They all live off campus. So they're paying for rent, utilities. A lot of them have families, especially our international grads. And that, especially now with the rising costs of living and food, they're in a really tough predicament. So we're doing what we can to help them and support them because, you mentioned some of a little bit about academic retention, and that's one of the things we're looking at here is how can our students focus on their academics and get good grades so they can get great jobs when they're focusing on where their next meal is going to come from, not just for themselves, but often for their families as well. And that's a lot of the work that we're doing here now is helping them, alleviate that stress so they don't have to worry about it, but also setting them up for success in the future so that when they don't have a resource like the pantry, they can still make do.
I read an article a few years ago, and it talked about how uh, for young people, everything in your life has to go perfectly for 16 years if you're going to get through elementary school, middle school, high school, and college. And who has a 16-year perfect record without some hiccups and bumps? So the work you're doing is so important. One of
Thank
the uh,
you.
one of the things I know you've tried to do is really be innovative with the Clarkson Food Pantry. You have very limited hours that you can actually be open, so you've come up with some ways to get around that barrier. Tell us about the CU Pantry smart lockers. How does that work?
Yeah, so our Smart Locker project was really quite the feat. Working with the Food Bank of Central New York and the Mother Cabrini Health Foundation, we were able to explore and purchase temperature-controlled smart lockers that we house on campus. So part of this is, us trying to align with the Food Bank of Central New York's strategic plan to really meet our neighbors and our students where they are. And for our students, especially at, Clarkson, they're very busy. The schedule and life happens, right? So no one can have that perfect college experience without some hiccups. So one of the things we saw is a lot of students weren't able to visit the pantry during our limited hours. So we started talking about how can we meet them where they are without us maybe having to be there in person. So with the smart lockers, students can now order online. They order on Fridays, and our pantry assistants will pack them in advance and then put them in the lockers. And the students will get a text message or an email once their order is ready for pickup. It's all automated, and then they can go whether it's right after their order gets packed or at 2 a.m. the following day. The idea is that it works for their schedule and they're still able to access a resource that they need, whether it is food assistance or assistance with personal hygiene products. We're just trying to meet their needs, meet them where they are. So this project has been a really great thing for the pantry for Clarkson University as a whole. And right now, we're working with some other graduate students to develop a software for the smart lockers that'll be integrated into the system. It'll sort of serve as a pantry management software. It'll do our inventory as well as the ordering for the students so they can see our live inventory when they go on an order. So I'm really excited for that. But yeah, these smart lockers have been a really great help for us. We really got into utilizing them this semester, and every single week we're filling up all the orders, and we just added two additional order pickup days. So it's been a really great experience. I'm really glad that we have them.
This is where being at a technical college like Clarkson University, you really can leverage a lot of the assets that are on campus to help you do this kind of work and make it as seamless as apparently you are making it. So, the idea for the food access survey came out of a marketing research class that you're taking this semester. Tell us about that class and how you developed the idea for this survey.
Yeah, so I'm taking a marketing research class with Crystal LaRock, one of our instructors here at Clarkson. And in the class, it's uh, each team that the students get separated into teams, and then they get to pick different organizations that they can work with. And, I'm hoping to one day work for the Food Bank of Central New York. I'm planning to intern with them again this summer. So I thought, what better opportunity than now to involve them in this? So I reached out to the food bank and we were talking about what their current needs are, what research they're doing. And one of the biggest things they're trying to understand right now is why neighbors aren't accessing the resource. So we do get, we have a really great reach. We have a lot of people utilizing the resource, but we know there's still more out there. There's still more neighbors who could utilize this. So we're trying to understand why that is, whether it's, transportation barriers, the stigma behind it, but really breaking that apart and getting into it so that we can address our services and make the changes that we need to on our end, whether that's working with county officials to get better bus schedules or better access to that, or just working with our partner agencies to change their hours.
So this is a great time to ask you to tell us a little bit more about the Food Bank of Central New York. You said, as you mentioned, you interned them with last summer. You'll be returning this summer. Tell folks what the food bank does, who it serves, and the critical role it is playing in keeping people fed in rural areas like ours, please.
Yeah, so the Food Bank of Central New York is a member of the Feeding America network. All of us know about Feeding America. But the Food Bank of Central New York has an 11 county service area going down to, I believe, Madison County all the way up to St. Lawrence County. So they have quite the stretch that they have to deal with. And what the food bank, the way I think about it is the food bank is a facilitator or conduit for the pantries that we have in our communities to get the food out. So the food bank with the Feeding America network, they have a really unique amount of buying power. So they can go in and work with government and state officials to get grants, private grants, and private donations to provide their partner agencies. So the food bank will receive those state grants that they can then purchase food and then provide free to our partner agencies like the CU Pantry here at Clarkson. And what they do with that then is, when they push it out to us, we can distribute it. We follow a point system that they've set up with us through Feeding America and the government to make sure that we're providing our neighbors with not just a standard package, but with stuff they're actually going to utilize. So we don't want to give you things that are going to end up going to waste. But the food bank also plays a vital role in advocacy, especially for our area. So the food bank, they're always working with our state officials, our local officials. They're going down to DC. They're advocating for increases to things like SNAP, especially in the New York State budget. Getting fully funded for SNAP, increasing that is a really key piece that the food bank takes part in. But they also help connect our local pantries with other grant opportunities. So the food bank's not just getting grants for themselves, they're getting it for us as well. And that allows us to do things like the Smart Locker project. That allowed us to purchase them. They worked with other pantries to help expand their space, to help cover utilities, stuff like that. So they really play a versatile role in feeding the people and enabling our local communities to address that on their end.
So it is a great organization, and you've done a great job of explaining how they fit into the bigger picture. But the focus of your survey is to better understand what the barriers are to people
Mhm.
utilizing their community food pantries. Why are people who could benefit from food assistance not currently accessing available resources? How will this survey help you to find that out?
Yeah, so the survey we sent out, we're asking questions about, what the general barriers are. So one of the things we've seen so far with the results is transportation is coming up a lot, which this is something the food bank has kind of thought about already. You know, in St. Lawrence County, we're a very spread out area for sure compared to Jefferson and, Oswego County and Syracuse area. So the food bank, with that information, we can provide that to the food bank, and that allows them to have, I guess, a more strategic approach to when they're working with county officials, saying, these are the things that we need for sure. But the survey allows an opportunity for our neighbors to really be honest with how they're feeling. because we're not taking any names or collecting any personal information because it's not about that in the grand scheme of things. It's just about how can we get you the resources that you need to live. Um, and one of the things we're seeing in addition to transportation, we've seen that hours might be a little bit of an issue as well. So sometimes a lot of our pantries are ran by individuals who are already working a full-time job, or maybe they're retired and then have limited availability. So we're going to try and figure out how can we work around that issue? How can we set our pantries up? So then this is another thing the food bank plays a key role in, is setting up these pantries. So we work with them to we sort of assess them for partnership, and then from there, what I can envision this survey helping us do is create some sort of process to, when we're considering partnering with a pantry, understanding what their hours should look like to serve their community and how that would change things for them, so that we can ensure that when we're when we're equipping the pantry from the get-go, it's set up for success for the neighbors and for the people running the pantry. So I think the survey gives us the opportunity to get that unfiltered data, as I mentioned, because it's anonymous. And we're going to take time to really break that down. We've done a focus group as well with some pantry leaders to help us get that perspective, which is really key in this, because they have a unique relationships with their neighbors who are utilizing the resources. And those neighbors have good relationships with people who might not be utilizing the resource. Some things that we're also seeing, which I think, this is an unfortunate piece of the puzzle that we're looking at, is the stigma. A lot of people, I think, in our area worry about the perception of when if they're utilizing this resource, you know, they don't want to be seen as, is this someone giving pity to me? Or is this someone offering me a handout? And what we're trying to do on our end is show people and help people understand that it's okay to need this resource, that it's not a handout. We want to set you up for success. We understand that the reason you're in this situation is out of your control, and that's not your fault. So we have the ability to provide you with this help, and that's what we want to do.
You make a really great point there, because this is something that we've seen over and over again whenever we have an economic downturn. COVID was a perfect example because people were thrown out of work. They were in bad situations through no fault of their own. And people who had never, ever thought they would ever have to turn to these kinds of assistance programs have done so. But really, you make a great point. This is how you set people up for success. As soon as you're not worried about where your next meal is coming from, you can figure out some of the other challenges in your life. So, this is really a very important set of piece of information that you're trying to get. And by fine tuning the community responses, you can really help to make sure that the pantries and and we have dozens of pantries in St. Lawrence County, every little town, a lot of churches have pantries, but this is a way for them to actually figure out what, when, and where they need to be in their own small community. So I think this work is so important. I'm going to put the link to the survey in our show notes so people who haven't seen it can click on it. But tell us how
Thank you.
long the survey is going to be open and what people see when they actually click on the survey link.
Yeah, so in regards to how long the survey is going to be open, for the duration, for the purpose of the class, we're going to have our own sort of cutoff period in probably the next week or so, but we're still going to keep the form open because conveniently with me returning to the food bank and working with them so closely, we're always going to be doing this type of research. So I'm hoping to keep this form open so that we can continue to collect that data, and that can help fuel the food bank's research, outside the duration of this class. So in, short term, we're not going to be closing the form at all. But what people will see when they get onto the form We have a couple screening questions that we'll ask to really understand is the person filling out the form food insecure. So we're following the USDA's screening questions for food insecurity. And that's asking things like in the past 12 months, have you had to reduce the amount you eat per day because there have been a lack of food or a lack of money to purchase more food? Questions like that, so that we're making sure that we're getting the right people that are really in need of this resource. And then from there, we get into questions about, the general barriers. So is transportation a barrier? Is getting word or information a barrier for you? Understanding that piece. We also ask some questions about of the information that you're getting from X, Y, and Z sources, how much do you trust this information that you're getting? So we're also trying to gauge, how aware are people of the food bank social media channels, of the local news channels, stuff like that. How much do they trust them? We're also asking questions to understand where they're getting information from. And what we've seen a lot of in the surveys so far is word of mouth, and friends and family is a huge piece in that. So not as much social media, things like Instagram or Twitter. A lot of it is just in the community, talking to friends and family. And that is a really important thing to know for us to understand, okay, how do we get the information and how do we pivot maybe away from the social media to getting this information out, whether it's paper, whether it's we send things out in the mail or we do town halls or community events. How do we get that information into the hands, into the minds of these people who are talking to their friends and family who could utilize the resource?
So that's really interesting. And that really means that you will have to understand the communities that you're working in and
Mhm.
figure out who those trusted voices are, what those trusted sources are, and, make sure you're in partnership with them, not just with the food pantry in that community. So I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And, obviously, one of the outcomes of your survey is going to be to identify those outreach strategies that will better connect people with their food pantries in times of need. Do you have some preliminary information you've been able to pull from the survey yet, or is it a little bit too soon to know what some of these trends are?
Yeah, so from what we've seen so far, transportation has been a big thing that's come up. And I think what that tells us that what we need to do is work more closely with the county and public transportation and really figure out how can the food bank and the county work together, or the townships, to either provide more funding to get more buses or to provide funding to hire additional drivers with the correct certifications to operate the buses, and figure out a sustainability plan for that. And that's one of the big, the overarching pieces of this is, we're putting together these strategies, but we also have to ask ourselves, how are these sustainable? How can we set these up so the food bank doesn't always have to have a hand in it or checking in 24/7, but so that the towns, the pantries, the counties can operate independently and really make these things last. Another thing we're seeing, like I mentioned, word of mouth is a very big way that these individuals are getting information from. So it's understanding, I know I mentioned this earlier, what can we do on our end to get that information to them, is that through town halls that we will bring in food bank officials and we'll just host info sessions. A lot of things that came up in our focus group, which I think align with this, is these pantries have been around, especially like the church pantries have been around for years, right? So a lot of the people who have been born and raised in these towns already know about them, or most likely they do. But what we think we're seeing is, like, for the new folks that are coming into the town, they might not know about these. And what is the strategies of the pantries to get that information out to them outside of their normal circle? So that's one of the things we're really looking into too, is how do we break this our current communication circle? How do we expand that to involve more people and make that sustainable. So we know when we send information out to one resource, what will it trickle down to? Who else will it get to? So I think that's some of the things that we're seeing so far. And it gives us a lot to think about. Some of it are things that in our minds, myself and the food bank have kind of figured would be an issue, like the public transportation piece. We know our public transportation up in St. Lawrence County is not the best. We work really hard to, do what we can, but it's still not quite getting to these people that need it, to our neighbors. So another thing with that would be maybe one of those bus stops is at that pantry, right? Or just up the street from where it used to be, and making the routes more known to the public. Because that's another thing on my end, as a community member, I look around and I don't see many signs or advertisements that say, oh, this is the bus schedule, right? A lot of it's online. And we do have neighbors in our county who don't have internet, who maybe don't have cell service. Some people don't have phones. And it's important to recognize that and figure out how do we still get information out to those people, right? What happens if the network goes down or the Wi-Fi is out? We can't afford to pay that bill. What are the alternate routes that they can go to get the information for the bus schedules to make sure they can get to those pantries? So those are some of the things we're looking at with the information we're getting from the survey so far.
So you're really looking for partners in the community. Obviously, for families
Mhm.
with young children, the school system is a great way to use that. The public libraries, every community has a public library. That's another great way. I've worked a lot with the Office of the Aging, which have wonderful resources with the elderly population. And many of those people fall into the category that you're talking about:
Yeah.
isolated, lack of transportation, maybe no internet. So lots of places where um, there can be barriers to communications breakdown. I'm so glad to hear that you're going to keep the survey open and going, though, because that we're just in the process of getting the information out about the survey. And if it's going to stay open past the end of the semester, that gives you many more opportunities to connect with people, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the food bank's really committed to getting, hearing the concerns and the comments from our neighbors, especially up here. The food bank I know is working really hard to have more of a presence in our county, not just with, the county legislators or officials, but with the neighbors, with the
Mhm.
communities to really understand what that need is. Because Syracuse is a long ways away from us. It's 2.5 hours. So it's nice to see that they're working so hard to get back up here, and I'm really proud of the piece that I get to play in bringing that up here. So,
Well, the other thing I would think is that this is a great model for other counties and for other food
mhm,
banks to use. So, I mean, everybody needs this kind of information, and
absolutely.
if you're going to gather it, we need good, trusted sources to gather the information. Johannes, thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you for the
Thank you.
care that you are taking for the people in our community, and you're expanding that much more broadly, obviously, um, to the entire county, but really the whole food bank network is going to benefit from this work. So I think you are on the right track. You're doing a great job. I know the people on your campus appreciate the work you're doing, and I
Thank
think
you.
that I'd like to have you come back maybe after your summer internship, and then by then you'll have gathered more information, and maybe the food bank will be better able to fine tune how they provide services here in our county.
Yeah, I would love that so much. Thank you so much, Donna, for having me on. Like I said, I was so ecstatic to share with my professor that someone saw this and they want to spread the word with us. So I really do appreciate the work that you do and getting this word out there, giving the attention that it deserves. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. I think this is a good partnership. So
I
let me
agree.
just remind folks that these conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country Matters and fill out that food survey because this is important information that this food bank needs in order to be able to provide more timely services to folks. So thanks again, Johannes, for coming in.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.